Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee with Craig, where we talk about all things firearms, firearms policy, politics, culture, media, you name it. We're talking about it right here on Coffee with Craig. So please take a moment, like and share the program so that your friends can join in the conversation. Also, please make sure that you go and you subscribe to our YouTube channel and you follow us on Facebook. In both cases, make sure you hit the notification button. That way you can get notifications as soon as we go live, and you can participate in the live chat while the program is going on. Also, I want to encourage you to please visit FPCgear.com. That's FPCgear.com. It's a cool place to go find all sorts of Pro 2A swag, t-shirts, coffee mugs, hoodies, all of them are there. But the best part about it is that every penny that you spend there goes right back into the fight for right to keep and bear arms. So you can support the Second Amendment and you can look good doing it. That's FPCgear.com. Now, talking about supporting the Second Amendment, I am here in Washington, D.C. Have been for a while. You guys have been watching all the videos about the stuff that we're doing, and we've been going from office to office with. I've been actually had the pleasure of going office to office with a couple of good friends, one you know and one you are just about to meet. And these are the folks who are here on the ground in Washington, D.C. on the regular, fighting for our right to keep and bear arms. So with that, I would like to welcome to the program Mr. Russell Laird and Mr. Phil Watson. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
We're good. Thank you for having us.
Excellent.
Good to be with you, Craig.
Excellent. So, all right. So, you know, we've been to a number of meetings. You guys have been to more than I have. What's the general? First of all, we've been talking largely about red flag laws. So, what's the general sense you're getting as to whether or not as to where, say, Republicans are and where Democrats are on this particular idea of red flag laws?
Well, I think, first of all, the overwhelming majority of the offices that we visit on actually both sides of the aisle aren't sure yet, because there's all kinds of proposals out there, and as far as the quote-unquote bipartisan legislation that's supposed to be produced by Senator Graham and Senator Blumenthal, they don't even have a draft yet to discuss. So there's all kinds of speculation out there right now, and nobody really knows what's going to happen or what's going on, or if they can support the legislation or not. So right now there's more questions than answers out there. So that's what we're out here finding out, sort of taking a soft poll of these offices and seeing where people are at, how they field our concerns, and what if there's any serious questions that we can answer for them.
That's a good one. So what are some of the types of questions you're getting from these offices relating to red flag laws?
Well, first I was going to follow up on Phil's comment there and say, you know, we'd like to have more definitive answers if we know exactly where everybody stands, and we're you know, have solid data that shows that we're in the lead, and we don't have that. But sometimes, you know, not having solid news is better than what could be the case. And so we were glad that a lot of our meetings really showed that folks are taking, we've heard a couple times, a thoughtful approach, and we're really glad to hear that, because early on we heard so many times, do something. Well, maybe we don't need to really rush to do something if we're not doing the right thing. But as far as questions that have been asked, they've been good discussions, and we're glad that we're having the opportunity to have this dialogue and the discussions with the staff to answer some of their questions, to try to help educate them. These people that work for members of Congress are sharp people that ask good questions and have asked us a lot of technical questions, and we've been able to explain to them some of our concerns about due process and the ex parte hearings. I'll let Phil go into some more of that. He's been really the one diving into the details in a lot of those meetings that we've had.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people have keyed in on the ex parte aspect of this. Of course, secret one-sided hearings. You know, are you going to have an attorney? Is there going to be some sort of special advocate? If you can't afford an attorney, is there going to be one provided for you? You know, what's the appeals process look like? How much is this going to cost people? What are the impacts of this on someone's professional reputation and the rest of their life? Those are a lot of serious questions that really haven't been delved into hard enough, and I think a lot of offices still have major questions about what that would look like. You know, are people going to use this maliciously or frivolously? You know, what's the penalty for that going to look like? And what, you know, so there's so many unanswered questions right now. There's also questions about how the law has been used so far. You know, have these actions been overturned? at the state level when people are accused of things that they didn't do, or they're able, you know, somehow to prove that, you know, these accusations are false or frivolous. What happens then? You know, and how are people's property returned? How can they get their property? How much is that going to cost? So those are all huge questions that right now people just don't know the answers to, and that's a problem.
The thing is though, one of the things that I'm getting from the meetings that I've been in is that many of the people who would normally be on our side don't even know to ask those questions.
Right.
And so what's been great is watching you guys present that information and present those questions, because these are all questions that we don't know the answer to, because in places where it has been instituted, those are areas of massive failure.
Right.
People not being able to get their property back, people not being able to have legal representation, not knowing what the standard is in terms of proving whether or not they're a danger to themselves. I mean, all of this stuff, all of these details, and quite frankly, the Democratic members that you guys are meeting with, they're not even thinking about any of this stuff. They're just thinking, take guns out of the hands of people who might be dangerous.
Well, I think some, you know, and that's a generalization there. Some of the Democratic members we've met with, some of this stuff has actually given them food for thought, and we're glad to hear that. And some of the members that we've met with on the Democrat side aren't really sure, because again, we haven't even seen the legislation yet. So there's just a lot of uncertainty out there right now, and it's a good thing we're here, because we can open up a dialogue on the serious questions about these types of laws that really there are no concrete answers to right now, because most of the people on the other side of the equation are just pushing them and saying how great they are. And there's not enough voices on the other side of the spectrum saying, okay, let's dive into the details here and examine what if these laws were implemented tomorrow, what would the impact of that be on people's rights, and how does that play out, and what are the questions about it? So,
well, I'm glad. It sounds like you have probably a little more faith in the Democratic members than I do. And that's not, once again, you know, I don't want to lump all of the Democrats in one thing, but I think a lot of them, in particular, the leaders, are more interested in not so much their staff. My experience has always been, when you deal with policy staff, they're interested in the policy implications. In most cases, they don't necessarily have an agenda, or at least if they have an agenda, they're at least trying to be fair-minded and they're trying to do the right thing. Unfortunately, a lot of times the final decision isn't necessarily always made by it's not always made by the policy people. A lot of times the final decision is made by the political person.
Right.
And that can cause a bit of a problem.
Right. And I mean, so we only have seen these types of laws introduced in 17 states, and we've visited with members on both sides of the aisle where there is no law like that from their state. So they have literally zero knowledge and zero experience about these types of laws. So it's really good that we've been able to answer some questions for them and start a dialogue there, because a lot of them, quite honestly, like I said before, they're not really sure what's going to happen, or where it's going to go, or where they fall on this, you know, because it's going to impact every state a little differently, because every state has a sort of a different legal system usually. So, I mean, there's just a lot of unanswered questions out there.
So just real quick, so folks, just to kind of let you know, I mean, one of the things we're hearing right now is that's the reason why even when we tell you guys to call Democratic members, I know some of you are like, oh, well, Democrats don't. Let me tell you something. Their staff is going to let their members know that their constituents are calling and asking questions. In particular, if you're asking the right questions. We already told you about the white paper that's been written by our legal team. Read that. Look at some of those concerns, and then express those concerns to your representative, even if they're a Democratic member, because when they realize that the average person knows that this is a concern, it can make a difference.
Well, I was going to say, you said, well, maybe we have more trust, or whatever your comment was. We don't have too much trust in anybody. That's what our job is, to constantly be out there educating them. And, you know, our job's not, we're not going to close this interview and say, oh, we're good today, let's go home. Every day we have to be always watching, always vigilant, and you do too. And folks out there, members of FPC, have to be out there letting them know what's important to them, and we'll do our job here in Washington to continue that communication, but not take anything for granted. You know, one thing that we, again, as Phil mentioned, we're not able to answer the questions yet on exactly what the proposal is, because the exact proposal, there's been discussions talked about with Senator Graham, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, and Mr. Blumenthal, senator from Connecticut. Discussions between them that we've heard about, but no agreement on exact language, the exact draft of a bill. And so we need to see that before we can really get into the specifics of what's going to be the proposal, if there's something to move forward. So, you know, glad that they've not seen that yet, because we don't have quite the rush to judgment quite yet. But without that, we can't really pick into it to see exactly what's being proposed. So we're going to have to continue working continually as we go forward here.
Well, and once again, as you're educating members on the entire spectrum of it, they know, for lack of a better term, they know the red flags to look for. So that way, as soon as they see, okay, ex parte, well, wait a minute. So if it's going to be if you're funding ex parte, so how exactly is this due process going to work? You know, how exactly is due process going to work in the long run? And it gives you an opportunity to be able to have that conversation.
Well, we'll say too, be sure that, you know, we're focusing a lot of our discussions here on red flag issues, because we've heard that's something that's really been looked at. You know, we had a productive discussion with staff at the White House, and one of the things that's worth mentioning, that they said that they're trying to look at all type of proposals, and, you know, they're trying to be, you know, the president, I think, is trying to take this view of letting people know he has an open mind to look at all things. But we hope when he looks at all things, he looks at them closely and sees the concerns that we see. Again, we're focusing a lot on red flags, but there's other things out there too that we can't rest on anything yet to know that other proposals could come up. We've had discussions about background checks, and, you know, the House has passed several bills. The House has passed a background check bill and several other things, and the House might pass some more bills. They're going to have a markup in the House Judiciary Committee actually today that got moved back because of the hurricane down there, with a concern of some members being able to get back to Washington for that discussion. But they've moved that to sometime next week. They haven't even announced the day yet. So again, we still have more work to do. The House, you know, again, can pass more bills, partisan bills, since they have the votes there, with the House being controlled by Democrats. But then they come over here in the Senate, and we again need to make sure that the members of the Senate take a thoughtful approach at these bills. And I'm glad that the meeting at the White House, the staff there mentioned that they are taking a thoughtful approach. So we're going to continue that dialogue with them, continue watching them to ensure that they do take that thoughtful approach.
Excellent, excellent. So before we go, tell our members real quick, what are the things you think they should be doing as you're here and we're here doing our work here in DC? What are the things you'd like to encourage them to be doing?
Well, number one, if you haven't called both of your senators and your congressmen and also written to them, that's number one. Number two, I would say develop some sort of personal relationship with your representatives. If they're in some meeting in your district, or, you know, in your state, and you have time to go do that and meet them, you know, go ahead and do that, because a face-to-face meeting or a phone call is usually better than, you know, just an email. So those are definitely big things you can do, you know, to show that you're concerned with how they're going to vote on that issue. Because we can go in the office and, you know, talk up and down all we want and, you know, wag our finger at them, but until the people in their home state contact them and tell them, you know, this is a concern to us and we're watching how you vote, you know, that's of higher importance to them, because you have the power to unelect them. So that's a big deal for everyone watching and all of our members. So that's number one on the list if you have that. Also, tell your friends about it. You know, share some of FPC's material. We've got lots of material. We were talking about the white paper earlier. So tell your friends and your family about this issue and all the issues that are currently going on that we're alerting you about. So those are the two big things that you can do as a force multiplier for us as well.
Well, I agree, and I probably really can't add much to what Phil said, but, you know, right now we're just in September, and August was a big break in Congress. schedule, and so a lot of them have been back in their district or with other travels, and so there's still a few more days until they come back into session next week. So look for those opportunities. Now, when next week is passed and they're back into session, that doesn't mean all opportunity is gone. As Phil said, they're always back and forth, and so look for opportunities going forward when Congress has a break in session, or even just sometimes a lot of members go back and forth just for the weekends. Look for events where they might be there. We can have a dialogue, a respective, try to be friendly dialogue, but be clear and let them know about your concerns. I'd say for sure. And I'll say, I'm again Russell Laird with North Star Policy Navigation. We're a consulting firm here in Washington. We're here in Washington, and glad you guys came and spent some time to visit, and glad FPC can come spend some time. We're here in Washington. We're going to be here on the ground, staying in Washington, constantly watching as we go forward, but we can't do it all ourselves. We need engagement from FPC members to really make it work. Exactly.
Folks, can't say it enough. Number one, make sure you visit stopredflaglaws.com. That's stopredflaglaws.com. Also, visit firearmspolicy.org, and if you go to firearmspolicy.org/actions, or you click on the Actions tab, there's all of the legislation. Right at the top is the federal legislation that you guys need to know about and be concerned about. Make sure your voice is heard. That's an easy way to do it. But after you've done that, make sure you make a phone call. Call your representatives, in particular your senators, because that's where these things are going to start to move. In particular your senators. Call the White House. Also make sure you let them know. And after you've done all that, make sure you share the information with your friends. Make sure they get engaged as well, because ultimately what it's going to come down to, it's going to take the masses in order to be able to make this thing happen. Anyway, gentlemen, I want to thank you for all that you're doing here in Washington, D.C., and for the fight for our right to keep and bear arms. I want to thank you for coming on the program. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. All right, ladies and gentlemen, well, hey, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. Please remember to like and share the program, and tell your friends about the Firearms Policy Coalition. We are the home in the fight for civil rights. Got to use them, or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.